I don't get too much discrimination from Japanese people here based on the fact that I'm black. Now, other Asian tourists or whatnot, I might get stares and stuff from them, like people from China or Korea or whatever. And you know, I've had experienced racism as anti-black racism from other foreigners, like white foreigners and such out here, which is interesting.
Welcome to the Melanated Files. In this series, we highlight and share the stories of black people from across the globe. Remember to subscribe to this channel for weekly videos and also follow us on social media for regular updates. Let's get into the interview.
My name is Nayokenza Robyn Oliver, and I'm from Orlando, Florida, and United States. All right, so so Nayokenza, it was a name that I created for myself when I was about 13. My actual name I'm just named after my father. And so my father had his nickname and I had my own nickname, but I kind of outgrew that nickname around the age of 13. So at that point I was learning more Japanese and I was learning like Japanese slang and stuff. And there was this phrase called like fuzaken nayo. So I took the nayo from fuzaken nayo, but then I also thought that the other like zaken part was a bit wasted. So I decided to go from zaken nayo to Nayokenza. And yeah, it kind of stuck ever since I was 13. Yeah, the meaning behind like fuzaken nayo is kind of like, it's kind of a rude meaning though. It's kind of like, to put it bestly, it's like, don't mess with me, don't bother me. But I didn't really care for the meaning, I just liked the way the word sounded. And yeah, I think naming myself Nayo was more of me coming into my own as my own person, because I'm a junior. My father and I have the same name. So I always grew up being a junior, being a junior, being a junior. So it was a way for me to like assert my own identity. I think more so than Japan, I chose Tokyo. So as a kid, I grew up in Orlando, Florida, and Orlando's very much revolves around hospitality. And I was lucky enough to grow up in Celebration. So I spent a lot of my weekends in the Walt Disney World Resort. And then in high school, I also worked at Dr. Phillips. So kind of that whole like weird city within a city vibe, I was used to that. And my family's originally from New York and New Jersey. So we'd go back there and visit that. So I liked that type of architecture, like metropolitan areas. And I just liked Tokyo. I was kind of a futurist as a child. And like in the 90s, the things you saw about Japan was technology and things like that. So combine that with going to Disney World and going to New York, I just thought that Tokyo would be cool. So yeah, as I got older, I got a few chances to come to Tokyo in my teens, and I liked it a lot. And I have a cousin that lives out here. That was really cool, kind of like a lifeline. And then I moved here once for university. I had to go back home to take care of some family issues, and came back for university, graduated. And I just stayed in Tokyo. For this point now, it'll be 7 years this year, and then prior to that, it was 2 years before. And right now, yeah, I'm mostly working the English teacher rate to pay bills and stuff. But aside from that, I'm also focusing on the band that I'm in. And I have 2 companies that I've launched. My partner and I, we do a children's dance event company that we're looking to build up this year. And I just started writing children's books with my illustration partner from the States, and we're looking to release 2 books this year. I think the thing that inspired me the most to get into children's books was kind of like a natural progression from, I guess, the children's dance party company. I'd been working with summer camps for a while in Japan, like doing my last year of university and a couple summers back, and I was the DJ for the DJ party. And it was a lot of fun doing that. Then when I wasn't the DJ for the DJ party, I would also like, you know, help out with the camp, and sometimes I'd have to like, you know, convert like crying kids who miss their parents. I'd read books to them. And I just remember thinking that like, you know, children's books, like the market's never gonna die. Like, you know, kids don't really buy children's books, but their parents do, their educators buy them. And if you put it on YouTube, it can be used in the classroom. So I wanted to create things that could help teach kids, but also something that like had a market that wouldn't go away, for lack of a better word. Well, I think my ambitions for life in Japan were kind of the same as they were when I was growing up back in the States. I just like having my own bubble, and I like being able to do what I want to do in the sense of expressing myself and like taking my time figuring out things without being rushed and disturbed. Like being a foreigner in Japan can be good or bad depending on how you look at it. I think a lot of people look at the solitude as a bad thing, but I quite like it. I quite like having my own little bubble and not really being bothered. So I guess, you know, finding out more about myself and discovering more about what I want to do in life, and then maybe probably moving someplace else in a couple of years. I'm not sure yet. Yeah, I think with the way I talk and stuff, and even like my accent has been a point of contention for some people. And basically what happened was, when I was younger, I had a speech impediment. When I was about 4 years old, I couldn't pronounce my R's correctly, and I was talking way too fast because we had moved from New Jersey to Florida. And yeah, I had to go to speech therapy class for a while, and I was, you know, after a while it got kind of annoying. So like in the early 90s, all these like British TV shows on like Nickelodeon, for example, like the Tomorrow People was one, or even the fact that like I lived in Orlando, there were always like Brits around for timeshare at the theme parks. So I think as a kid, I just thought, if I mimic the way they speak, like the received pronunciation, then people wouldn't bother me so much. And it became like a defense mechanism. So I like kind of mimicked received pronunciation, and then just stuck after a while. I think after a couple of years of doing that, it just stuck. And so now, like, when I'm not like focusing on pronouncing every single syllable in a North American dialect, it kind of comes up this way naturally now. So it's a weird thing. And the thing I like the most about Japan is, yeah, Japan really allows me a space to really just kind of reflect on myself. Like, I know that's kind of like, it might sound selfish or whatever, because I feel like a lot of people, if they say they like Japan, they say they like the culture, or they like the nature, they like the outer things. But the thing that I like the most about Japan is that it does give me a space where I can just not be bothered. I like the fact that, like, you know, people might be a bit afraid to approach me because I am a foreigner. Or the fact that people, you know, they might not necessarily come up and talk to me and chat with me because they don't know if I can speak Japanese or not. So it does give me like a nice little calm bubble to people watch and to figure out things about myself. But yeah, I think that's probably my favorite thing about Japan, is that, you know, it's a space for me for self-reflection. The thing I like the least about Japan, probably, like, there are a lot of things that I could say, you know, culturally might hinder them from like moving forward. But I feel like that's more of an issue for like the youth of Japan, and for the like specifically like, you know, women's issues, LGBT issues. I feel like I can't criticize those 100% because my own country, America, has issues with those. But yeah, so on one hand, there are those big issues that, you know, they still need to work on. But for me, I think the thing that I personally dislike the most about Japan could be the willingness to accept ideas from other sources that aren't Japanese. I think that's a big hindrance. Like, a lot of times people fall back on, well, in Japan we do this, well, in Japan it's this, in Japan it's that. And almost any idea that stems from a foreign source gets kind of shut down without being considered one way or another. So that's probably something I dislike. My favorite Japanese food, probably kaisendon, or unagi-don. So kaisendon is just like kind of like minced seafood, or not minced, but it's like raw seafood in a bowl over rice, which is quite good. Or then unagi-don is just like grilled eel over rice. It sounds terrifying, but it's delicious. I think the best life advice that I can recall right now that I received was, if you tell everything, hold on, let me rephrase this. Not everyone you speak to is going to be your friend. When I was coming up, I was quite like outgoing. I was quite like really open and talkative, and I would just tell people everything. And I would just say things as a way of trying to like maybe bond with people. But you gotta be careful who you talk to. You have to be careful what you say to certain people, especially when. So I think that's probably the best thing I've learned that I can think of right now, is that not everyone you talk to is going to be your friend. So be careful what you tell people, when you tell people, and who you're telling these things to. So yeah, with the tattoos were an interesting thing. Now, of course, everyone's experience is going to be different based on how the outside perceives them. You know, for me, I'm a tall black guy and I've got locks, so I think it kind of fits my image to a certain extent. But yeah, I always was interested in body art and modifications. I remember hearing that, like, you know, Japan doesn't like tattoos or this and that, blah, 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 blah. But I decided to go for it anyways. But I did get actually most of my tattoos done in Asia. So the first bits that I have here, I have my family's birth dates kind of scrolled around. I got those done in Malaysia actually. And then I've got some other images that represent my own life. Like I've got Florida here, and I've got Japan here. I've got a bunch of old band insignias on my arm to represent my own creative journey and stuff like that. So just like, I wanted to use my arms as a way to, like, you know, act as a canvas to tell my story. For when I, you know, when I'm an old man, I look back on my life. I don't want to be tired of my tattoos. I want to look back at them and, like, you know, recall certain things that were important to me at a certain time. Yeah, so most of the American Flash ones I got done actually, I got done in Japan. I got done by two people who were friends of mine. So two people working at the same studio in Yokosuka. I got one done by a female artist, which I really liked a lot. And then I got another one done by like another male artist who I'm cool with as well. So I got those done in Japan. And The text, the typography though, I got that done in Malaysia because it was a friend of a friend's shop and an excuse for me to go to Malaysia. Yeah, so I have been to onsen with a tattoo, but the thing about onsen that kind of ties into one of the reasons why I like Japan is that I don't go to the public onsen. Now, I think if you have tattoos, you might not be able to go to public onsen. There are some onsens now that are opening up and changing the policies, especially in lieu of the 2020 Olympics. But I'm not a big fan of going to the public onsen because if I go to the onsen, I usually go with my partner. And I don't want to go on an onsen trip with my partner and then separate for like an hour or two and be in an onsen with a bunch of people who I don't know. But if you do get the private onsen in your room, that's not an issue at all. So whenever I go to the onsen, we get the private ryokan, and that works out really well. So I've had no problems there. My black experience in Japan hasn't been that bad. I mean, once again, I can only speak for myself, but I grew up in all white environments mostly in Orlando. And there, the racism in North America, it's a bit more sinister in the fact that it's slowly attached to your race. Whereas in Japan, you have a bit more xenophobia. That's kind of like they paint most foreigners in one kind of brushstroke. So I've had maybe like anti-foreigner discrimination. So as far as like specific anti-black discrimination goes in Japan, for me, in my experience, has been like very few and far in between if I've had it. Most of the time, I tend to experience maybe like kind of like a xenophobia against foreigners, but as a foreigner who's from like an obviously Western background, I don't really get it too much, especially like I guess also as a male and as an American too. People here tend to like kind of hold Americans and males in somewhat of a higher regard as far as like the foreigner food chain goes. So I don't get too much discrimination from Japanese people here based on the fact that I'm black. Now, other Asian tourists or whatnot, I might get stares and stuff from them, like people from China or Korea or whatever. And you know, I've had experienced racism as anti-black racism from other foreigners, like white foreigners and such out here, which is interesting. And I think once I had like an anti-black specific experience with, it was work related, but I feel like that racism there wasn't directly because I was black, but I think the anti-black rhetoric was used as an excuse as to why a student stopped coming into the classes after they had already quit, and we reached out to them like a long time ago. They just mentioned my race, but they didn't say anything bad about my race. They just mentioned the fact that I was black. So I can't say I've had like specific anti-black racism as I've experienced in the States, obviously, out here. Might just be like slight xenophobia and ignorance. Yeah, so I work for an English teaching company and we teach adults, and we had one student that just came for 2 lessons and then he stopped coming after a while. And one of the like the secretaries or whatever, they reached out to him to ask him what happened. And he had said that he had an unpleasant experience with the black teacher and then he stopped coming. That was like the English translation of it, but the Japanese that he used was very like it was very like childish. So it was like, you know, like I had a bad experience with the black teacher, so I don't want to study English anymore, and that was it. But this person was quite a high-level student as well, so you could tell this person had been overseas and what have you. So maybe whatever racism they picked up, he might have learned from the States or something. So yeah, it was kind of annoying, but it wasn't as bad as the racism that I have experienced in my own home country, ironically. I think the general attitude towards black people here is still better than what I've experienced with other Asians from other Asian countries and other Asian cultures. I think here, I mean, after the war, you know, there are a lot of black GIs here, and there's so many military bases here that there are a lot of like black people from that diaspora here, but then also there are a lot of Jamaicans here, there are a lot of black British people here, there are a lot of continental Africans here. So I think I don't think they're as concerned about it, to be honest with you. Like, I think the Japanese, when they talk about xenophobia and foreigners, they kind of just paint us all together, and the problem is that we're just not Japanese. It doesn't really matter that we're like white or black, it's that we're just not Japanese. Now, of course, Asian foreigners tend to get a bit more out here, like Zainichi Koreans who are like 3rd generation Korean out here, or like Chinese people who might be living in Japan. They might get more racism than I feel that black people specifically get for being black. I think maybe the funniest thing and also the most disappointing thing was, as I said before, I have locks. So like, you know, I have this hairstyle because I wanted to have a hairstyle that was long, but I could also maintain myself living in Japan. And so sometimes people see me and they have certain like misconceptions about who I am and what I am. I think it was like a couple of years back, like maybe 2 years, my friend and I, we were drinking in front of a Don Quixote in Shibuya. And yeah, this Japanese guy who was clearly heavily reggae influenced, like, came up, and I think he must have said like Rastafari like 3 times, and I was ignoring him. I knew he wanted to talk to me, but I was ignoring him. And they said it again, and he came to me, and he was like, "Oh yeah, like, you know, you must really love reggae and stuff," like, you know, to me in Japanese. And I was like, "Dude, I'm not Jamaican, I'm American." And like he apologized and went off. But like that was funny, but it was also kind of disappointing because like, yeah, what if I was Jamaican? Does that mean I obviously have to be a Rastafarian because I have locks? Like, just because I'm existing in this space doesn't mean I'm like a free, I don't know, like a plaything for people who might feel some sort of connection with a certain facet of black culture. So that was funny to me, but it was also a bit like concerning in that aspect. Like, would he go up to anyone that has locks and do that? Or was he just feeling quite emboldened at that moment? I don't know. Once again, so I think it comes to like difference in foreigner perspectives. I can only speak for myself again, but you know, like coming from, hey, what's up, mate? Yeah. So like coming from like a black American background, like, you know, I'm used to things in the States that I felt a bit iffy because of my ethnicity. Like I'm used to, like, you know, experiencing some overt racism and some, you know, kind of undercover low-key racism as well. So coming to Japan and just kind of dealing with like vague xenophobia hasn't really been that much of a shock to my system for me. It hasn't been something that I'm not used to. You know, I prefer to not have it, but it's not that bad comparatively to what I could experience back in my own country. So I think a lot of black foreigners who live here, they kind of have that with them. Like, there are things that they don't like and that they would like to change, but comparatively, once again, like, let me speak for myself, it may not be as bad as what you could deal with back home. Well, I think our lighter skin or white counterparts who come here, it's kind of like a shock to them. Like, they're so used to like always being on top, at the top of the food chain, as you would say. When they come here and they experience any type of, like, you know, what they deem to be discrimination, they have like this existential crisis, like they flip out. It's interesting to watch. Like, they tend to make more of a noise and a fuss about being called a gaijin or being a gaijin than their black counterparts. Like, black people, we talk about our experience in Japan as black people, but we already have that layer of black people already built into us. So we talk about what it's like to be here as that. Whereas like other foreigners, especially white foreigners, they just bang on so much about, oh, Japan's so racist and they're so xenophobic because, you know, blah, 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 because they're just not used to being treated any other way than with admiration, I guess, in that aspect. I grew up in a really predominantly like Southern Baptist, well, not really Southern Baptist, but I grew up in a really predominantly Baptist, Christian, evangelical, a la Americana environment. And yeah, that was fun as a kid because, like, you know, you get to watch VeggieTales and you go to Christian school and you have lock-ins and you have like youth group, and it's really cool. But then as you get older and you stop believing in it, you realize that it's harder to break away from it than it should be. Like, your parents might get mad at you because you don't want to go to church anymore, or certain friends might stop talking to you and try to judge you because you don't believe in Jesus anymore, or things like that. And when I started living in Japan more like full on, I started realizing how, you know, bizarre the connection between religion and everyday life was in certain Western countries. And I can only talk about America because that's where I'm from, but it just seems so weird that it's such a facet in everyday things. Like, presidential candidates have to pretend to be religious, or like so much revolves around spiritualism or religion, just everyday mundane things, from astrology to saying grace before you eat to like people's little inspirational quotes on their Instagrams or whatever. Just so much is steeped in supernatural. Whereas in Japan, like, you know, you have traditional things that might come from Shintoism or Buddhism that people might do like on New Year's or spring cleaning or, you know, for certain holidays, but they don't really believe in it full on all year round. So Japan's interesting because it's a testament to how you can have a polite society with good manners without having to necessarily really believe in religion as hardcore as religious people would make you believe. You can have a moral compass without being a religious person. So what I do to maintain my hair is whenever I go to the States, I buy the same locking gel that I use. But yeah, so I just bundle and buy a bunch and come back here. But yeah, every like 6 to 8 weeks, I'll do like a really deep cleanse, really deep wash with the intent to just twist the new growth. So just twist the new growth, put the gel on it, clamp them down with a pen, and then just blow dry it till it dries up in locks. And that was the reason why I chose locks, because I could do it myself, and yeah, I wanted to be independent with my hair maintenance. Yes, I do my hair myself. So I think the biggest difference between Japan and the States might be how people are educated to interact with the world around them. If you look at the American education system, it's very much not opinion driven, but you want to talk up for yourself. You want to, have debates and have discussions, and that's how people learn. And in Japan, it's more about kind of maintaining social harmony within the group and not standing out too much. And these are both good things, I feel, and the right amount. I think if you have too much of the American way, then you have people who are just spouting their opinions without any facts to back it up. But if you're too much in the Japanese way, then everyone's afraid to try something new or afraid to do something for fear of sticking out. So I think finding a nice bridge would be the best thing. But I think, in my opinion, those are the big differences between American and Japanese culture, is individualism versus group harmony. I would say my Japanese is pretty good. I think if I were to take the JLPT, I'd be like JLPT N2, but I need to study more kanji. Kanji wasn't as important to me as speaking and listening and being able to understand word when I was coming up and when I was studying myself. So my Japanese speaking ability is quite good, but kanji is probably pretty embarrassing. I know what they mean, but I don't know how to pronounce them half the time. 音楽やるのは14歳からかもしれない。その時の前のはずっと音楽聴いてて、でも全然自分が作れると思ってないし、だから14歳からちょっと雪止まってて、ちょっと立ち上げて自分の手で作ってみたかった。So what I just said was I've been making music since I was about 14, and before 14 I always listened to music, but I didn't think that I could make it myself. So around the age of 14, I kind of gathered my courage and built it up and decided to try making music with my own hand. So the way I learned Japanese was a combination of different things. My parents, I was very lucky. My parents were very supportive of educational endeavors. So back in 96, I would just ask for books with CD-ROMs and they would buy it for me. I would go to Borders or Barnes & Nobles and I would just beg my parents, let me have this Japanese language book, and they would buy it for me. And I would study and practice as much as I could that way. When I was in my teens, I was lucky enough to have Japanese friends, and they would correct me if I made mistakes. I was able to date a Japanese speaker in high school. So that was pretty cool too. I took Japanese class in high school, but that was really easy at that point because the way they teach Japanese in America, it depends. The way they taught it at my high school was the first year you learn how to say the days of the year, the days of the week. And in the second year you learned a little bit about how to say months. They don't really want you to learn Japanese. You're just taking it for the credits. But yeah, so it was a combination of self-study and my friends helping me, and then making a lot of mistakes. Making a lot of mistakes and just failing forward. If I make a mistake, I realize that was terrible, but I also had the experience of making that mistake and then making sure that it wouldn't happen again. I think with accents in general, I think accents, they're a sign of courage, because it's the fact that an accent shows that you are trying to learn another language that's not your own. Everyone's accent is kind of based on what the original language is. So if someone doesn't have an accent, then maybe they're a native speaker, they've been speaking since they were maybe a child, and maybe they've been bilingual since they were a child. But if someone has an accent as an adult, it just shows that they're taking the time to learn a language that's not their own. Now, obviously, sometimes it might be hard to understand thick accents, but still, I think people forget that accents show someone is actively trying to learn something. So I'm in a synth pop industrial, I guess maybe aggressive new metal band kind of. So yeah, we're called The Ocean and I, and I'm the producer for the band, but I'm also the vocalist on the songs. So what happens is I usually write most of the music for the band, and then we'll talk and share ideas once the ball has started moving. And then during the stage performances, I'll do vocals. So the lyrics are mostly in English. Sometimes I might write Japanese lyrics if I feel that way, but I try to keep it in English because I don't know, I feel it's kind of hokey if I write a lot of lyrics in Japanese. Japan isn't our only audience that we want. We want to be accessible to a lot of different people. So English is a bit more accessible in that aspect. So we don't want to just, only engage the Japanese audience. We're actually surprisingly, almost all of us are American. Yeah, we have members from Puerto Rico, from Atlanta, from California, myself from Florida, and then we have another member who's half Japanese, half American. So it wasn't intentionally that way. It's just my social circle, everyone who I reached out to happened to be from those backgrounds. And yeah, it's fun playing shows in Japan. Now, we tend to play the little foreign or bubble though. So we play a lot of foreign run establishments. So it's been a bit easier, but the turnouts have been good. The crowds, they're usually a mixture of Japanese and expat people that come. So you have the expats turning up, and you have like the Japanese people like really watching it, like what we're doing, and like, you know, really taking it in, which is really cool. And then afterwards, like the meet and greets have been fun, like, you know, people saying that they had a good time, or people saying that they want to work with us, both from the Japanese community and from the expat community. So that's been a lot of fun. In fact, I really want to play more shows going forward. If there's one thing on the world I could change, I think I would try to make sure that at least childhood diseases aren't a thing. Like I think it sucks that you have kids that have cancer, or you have kids that have terminal illnesses just from the jump. So like I know that's kind of like a hokey, like peaceful answer, but I would like to do that. Like just at least like the first 15 years of life, you're healthy. Like people are gonna get diseases, that's the thing, but I would at least like to give a 15-year grace period so that kids don't have disease, because that, for me, that's like personally heartbreaking, seeing sick children. I think for me right now, at this stage in my life, I would like to have dinner with Chester Bennington from Linkin Park, just to like, you know, see how he dealt with depression and anxiety as a frontman, and ultimately like what led him to taking his own life. So I would like to sit down and discuss that with him, because as a frontman of my band, as a front person, you know, I can see how like it could either be like really amazing or it could be really daunting, like depending on how you look at it. So like, you know, as someone who had anxiety from the jump and then being catapulted to the limelight for so long, I would like to talk to him about how that, you know, impacted him and ultimately decided to take his own life, or if he decided that very last moment. So I would like to talk to him. The biggest lesson I've learned in life thus far is this. It's twofold. Obviously, the idea of failing forward. If you make a mistake, don't like make that the end of it. Try to think, what I learned from this mistake, how can I go forward from this? And two, yeah, Japan's drinking culture, you can drink a lot here. So I was drinking quite a lot. No matter how good your point is that you're making, if you smell like alcohol when you're making a good point, people are going to disregard it, no matter what. So like, you know, just like not drinking as much as I was a huge lesson that took me a while to learn. Earliest memory is cutting my knee open as a kid. Yeah, I was crawling around and I think I cut it open. And I remember I was sitting on the toilet, my mom was like looking at my knee and crying. And that was my earliest memory. Yeah, fun times. If the world's listening, the one message I would like to give off is, or send out is, yeah, you know, don't be afraid to try things. Like, you know, if not now, when? I know that sounds very cliche and very hokey, but a lot of people, they put things off. Like, you know, I'll start working out next week, or I might start learning Italian in the winter, or I might start spending more time with my kids once, like, you know, I get a promotion at work. So just don't put things off. Like, you know, try to do what you can now. I think Japan, one thing that Japan does really well is two things. One, they take ideas from other places and they kind of expand upon it, but also the whole concept of like not really bothering people, like not causing like meiwaku toka, like not causing like a problem in public spaces. So like, you know, I can go for a walk at all hours of the night and I don't have to worry about being mugged or being accosted, or like I could go to Starbucks and leave my bag somewhere and go to the bathroom and not have to worry about it being stolen. People tend to let others have their space. I think that's quite good. My favorite place in Japan is where we are right now. I love Nakameguro. I think it's unique because it is in the center of Tokyo, but it doesn't feel as crowded as like your Shibuya or like your Harajukus or your Motosandos. Like it's kind of a nice mixture between residential and like hipster cafes and hipster areas, and also nature. Like you have Meguro River right there. This place is beautiful in like sakura season. So I really do like Nakameguro. It's like a bit of everything. I have a relationship now, I've been with a partner for a while, but when I was younger, when I was dating, I was, let's say, an opportunist. And I wouldn't turn down opportunities. And let's just say I was able, by being a tall, skinny black guy in Japan with long hair, I was able to have many opportunities, many experiences. And yeah, I think it's good if you know what you're looking for. People can get lost in it. Like people can come out here and like, you know, suddenly think they're like a Casanova because they're getting like hit up by people that they would get hit up on back home. But you have to take it with a grain of salt. Some people just want to sleep with a foreigner. They just want to be seen with a foreigner. All right, cool. I would happily oblige those people, but at least I was aware of what it were. Some people, they do want to date people, and that can be cool as well. Once again, I can only state my experience as a black man in Japan dating. Like, I think foreign guys have an easier time dating Japanese lasses than foreign lasses dating Japanese lads. just by the way the culture is set up. So for me, I had a blast. In fact, maybe I had too much fun. So I kind of had Peter Pan syndrome for a while. It's too much partying and dating and too much girls. So I think the most common misconception about Japan that a lot of people in the West have is the whole like Harajuku kawaii like anime stuff. Like it's not what Japan is anymore. Like the whole like Harajuku girl thing or whatever, that died off in like the mid 2000s, like at the end of it. Like gyaru culture is not a thing anymore really. Like how it were back from like 96 to 2003. So you have a lot of people who grow up on like, you know, their idea of Japanese pop culture, and they come here thinking that that's what it's going to be like. And it's kind of disheartening to see that, because there's so many other things that Japan has to offer than just like kind of now dead facets of popular culture for people to like, you know, really get into. So like, I mean, don't come here thinking that like, you know, everyone's gonna have like dyed pink hair and people are going to be walking around Harajuku like they're in a Gwen Stefani music video, or people are going to be so impressed with your knowledge of anime. It's just not gonna happen to that extent. But there are other things that about Japan you could get into. So my biggest misconception is, I think the biggest misconception is that it's like the whole like weird cool Japan thing. It's not an anime. The people who have real lives. I think the thing that maybe not media coverage, but I think one thing about Japan that needs more attention is probably children in foster care or orphanages, things of that nature. Adoption's not as common in Japan as in other countries, but there are a lot of kids growing up and like government provided, I don't know the proper term for it in English, but I'll just say like orphanages or like government provided like living situations. And I think those kids are at risk for a lot of different things. So I think there needs to be more attention for those children in Japan, within Japanese culture, and then not necessarily on overseas level, but I feel like in Japan there needs to be more awareness of kids who are in orphanages and situations like that. My advice for Black people looking to come to Japan or visit is, yeah, just do it. Like definitely do it. Don't spend too much time only in Tokyo. There's a really cool scene in Kansai. I kind of regret not going down there more. But yeah, definitely come to Tokyo, but also go to Kansai as well. Like go to Kobe, go to Osaka, go to Nara, you know, come to Tokyo, but also go to Yokohama as well. But yeah, definitely don't spend all of your time just in Tokyo if you're Black and you're coming to Japan. I think one thing that people would be surprised to know about me is that I am really, really good at admitting when I'm wrong. And I think, you know, I come off a lot as like this kind of brazen, opinionated, kind of hardline person with very hardline ideas and opinions. But yeah, I've been pushing myself more recently to really listen to people when they tell me that I'm wrong and they critique me, and trying to grow from that. So I'm proud of myself because I've become a lot better at being wrong, admitting I'm wrong, and growing from that. And also I feel like I'm really good at cooking poke, which is like Hawaiian raw fish and like soy sauce and ponzu and wasabi and negi. Yeah, I'm really good at making poke as well. I guess my proudest accomplishment so far is, there's two of them. The first one was actually making the band that I have now and like, you know, forming it, putting people together. I'm really proud of all my bandmates, and I think we have a good chemistry going. And my second proudest thing was I'm embarking on a sobriety experience right now. So like not being able to like drink, like, you know, when I go out to clubs or I go to things, and being able to like just say no to alcohol. I'm quite proud of that for me right now. It took me a long time to get there. The biggest risk I've taken was coming back to Japan. Yeah, I came back in 2012 to finish university, and I've been here ever since. So that was quite risky, I would say. Like I was doing all right in America. I could have stayed there, but I came back. Yeah, I'd do it over again for sure. If I didn't do it, then I wouldn't have had experiences that led me to write more music that I'm writing now. I wouldn't have found my bandmates that I have now, and I wouldn't be in the relationship that I am now if I had stayed in the States. So if I had to do it over again, yeah, I would do maybe 97% the exact same. And maybe I would do a bit more saving, maybe save a bit more money. That would have been the only thing I would have changed. So people can find me online, Instagram, at Avec Nayokenza, so AVECNAYOKENZA. And you can find my whole band and everything on Instagram at The Ocean and I, or also theoceanandi.com. that's probably the best way to find me is Instagram and then theoceanandI.com.
Thank you so much for watching. If you would like to share your story or have us visit your region, send us a message on any of our social media platforms or via our website.
That's good.